Welcome everyone, I'm really happy to be here. Um, I'm going to be talking about peer-to-peer car sharing and giving you some insights from a research project that we have been working on for a couple years or more now. I'm losing track of time. I also want to acknowledge Nathan McNeil, who is here, who's been the research program manager on this project, and Steve Hallen, a great PhD student who's been key in crunching millions and millions of data points. I think one of those.
I don't know how to do it as a technical resource here.
Oh,
Does that help? Yeah.
yes, I think that is perfect, assuming it still works for our video. All right, okay. So what am I going to share? I'm actually not sharing my car or bike today. I'm going to share some information. First, I'm going to give you a very quick background on the project and the peer-to-peer car sharing system, and then I'm going to present some results. So quick background, let me just ask, how many of you have heard of Get Around and understand what it is? So little over half or so. One quick way to describe it is it's sort of like Airbnb for your car. It's a car sharing service that allows individuals to rent their car to other people. And Get Around is one company that provides this service. They've been providing it in Portland since 2012, and they are also in other markets throughout the country, including the San Francisco Bay Area. What Get Around does is they provide the infrastructure and the technology that allows you to rent your car to other people. Okay, just like Airbnb does for your home or rooms or whatever. Legislation was passed in Oregon in 2011 that basically took care of some of the insurance issues with this. Okay, so once that legislation was adopted and signed by the governor, Get Around started marketing and started their service in Portland. And also at that time, we worked with the city of Portland and Get Around to get a federal research grant through the FHWA's congestion pricing program to examine the effects of peer-to-peer car sharing. And you might wonder, why would FHWA congestion pricing program be interested in peer-to-peer car sharing? Like, how do those things connect? The one thing that really distinguishes peer-to-peer car sharing from other forms of car sharing like Zipcar or Car2Go is that people are renting out their own cars. So it may be affecting the behavior of people who own cars, not just the people who would be renting the cars. I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there that car sharing like Zipcar, etc., allows people to perhaps not own any car or own fewer cars and then use that car sharing service instead. And it can reduce car ownership, it can reduce VMT. That's been pretty well documented. With peer-to-peer, there's this other side of the coin, and that's the vehicle owner. And so the idea is, if I own a vehicle and I want to make some money off of it by renting it to other people, obviously I can't drive it if I want it to be rented out, right? So the idea and the question, one big research question we have is, will owners of vehicles drive their cars less in order to have them rented out? And what might be the net effect on VMT? So FHWA was particularly interested in that. Another question that we went into this study with, and it was a particular interest to the city of Portland, was would this model of car sharing open up opportunities to a more diverse community? Currently with car sharing, not just in Portland, but just about every city in the US, most car sharing services are privately run, and the cars are usually located in areas with higher income residents, higher density, higher income, less diverse communities. And there's a lot of documented evidence that low income and more diverse communities are not participating in car sharing. So could this model that's just based on individuals renting out their cars, perhaps at a lower price because the owner sets the price, could it open up car sharing to a wider audience and provide some mobility options to a more diverse community? So those were the two big overarching research questions that we are looking at in this long-term study. What I'm going to be sharing with you today, so we've finished data collection a few months ago. We have collected survey data from both owners and renters. We also, all of those cars that are being rented have GPS units on them that are collecting GPS points every couple minutes or so. So we have literally millions of GPS data points because all of the cars in our study are in the study for over a year. So we have over a year's worth of data on where those cars are going. We are still in the process of crunching all those GPS data points. So what I'm going to be focusing on today are some of the survey results and the insights from those. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about, so who are these people who are either renting out their car or renting other people's cars? Why do they join this type of a service? How do they use the service? How is it affecting their travel? And how might it affect travel? I do want to emphasize this project is going through the end of this calendar year. We still have more analysis, but I think I have some interesting insights to share with you today. And this is all new stuff. It hasn't been out there before. Okay, so the demographics of who these owners and renters are. Oh, my legend got a little wonky. Okay, the first bar, the orange bar, are car owners who are renting out their car. The darker orange bar are the renters, people who are renting cars. And then the green bars are the demographics for the city of Portland. So what I'm trying to do here is see how do these participants in this service differ or not from the city of Portland's population as a whole. And you can see on some demographic things, they're very similar. We have a fair number of one adult households that are owners. The vast majority of the participants, in addition to the population of Portland, do not have children in their household. The car owners are about half female, but renters, slightly higher rate of women being renters, and that's actually been shown in other car sharing programs as well. As you might expect, this is something that younger adults are definitely more attracted to. So both on the owner side and the renter side, a much higher share of the people in our study were between 18 and 35 than the general population. So those are the early adopters to this type of sharing economy. Racially, the demographics sort of match the city of Portland. Our people participating in the program and the study definitely more highly educated. And again, that's something that we've seen in other car sharing research as well. And then with respect to income, it's actually fairly similar to the demographics of Portland, both on the owner side and the renter side. Some small differences, but not big differences. One thing that is surprising, at least to us initially here, again, this orange, the light orange bar are the car owners. Nearly 60% of the owners who participated in our study only have one car in their household, and that's the car that they're renting out. Okay, that was a surprise to us. So we sort of anticipated part of the market would be extra cars in a household. But no, they're renting out the only car that they have. As you might expect, though, the renters, most of them are actually in a household. 65% are in a household that already has no car. So these are people who are already pretty multimodal, and about 25% or so do have one car in their household. So we are starting with a pretty multimodal group to begin with, both on the owner side and the renter side. So the owners, you can see here about a little over half of them regularly drive alone to work, at least before the start of the study. That compares to 64% for the city population. They're definitely more multimodal than the population as a whole. They're more likely, in particular, to be riding their bike to work, which explains why they can maybe rent out the only car that they have in their household. The cars in our study, from the owner perspective, were driven an average of 4.3 days in the last 7 days. So these are cars that are being used, but perhaps not intensely. because they're biking and taking transit. So why did the owners decide to participate in a program? I mean, remember when this started out, brand new, car sharing was not new, but this idea of renting out your own car was new. So these are really early adopters to this new type of service. The vast majority just like the idea of it. 84% said that they did want to make some extra money, so there is a financial incentive. 71% said, you know, I don't drive my car very often, so it's a shame for it to sit unused. Again, that sort of fits with the idea of the sharing economy. They like to try new things. A lot of them actually also wanted to participate in the study as part of their motivation. Renters, a wide range. Again, this whole idea of they just like the idea, okay? So this is something, the sharing economy is something that both on the owner side and the renter side is attractive for these participants. Membership was free from the renter side. And then we had a lot of questions on here about sort of car ownership. And so in particular, you see that our renters, some of those other options for renting a car, whether it be another car share or a rental car agency, were more expensive, so they were hoping this would be less expensive. I sometimes need a car or an extra car specifically for transporting goods, and you'll see that come up a bit later. Cars are too expensive. You know, being able to rent this extra car gives my household a lot more flexibility, things like that. 33% are doing it because they wanted to participate in the study. Okay, so again, I said that one of the reasons that we did this is to see how in particular it might change the owner's behavior. And that's sort of a new question for car sharing research. So these findings that I'm showing you are from the survey that we had all of the owners do at the end of the study. So after 16 months, most of that time their car is being rented out. We did a final survey, and this is their stated changes in behavior. And we do see some reduction in driving. So you'll see 37% say that they drive the vehicle that's being rented, the driving of that vehicle decreased, but it's not necessarily all being shifted to another vehicle in the household. So 22% said they increased how often they drive another vehicle. And then this line here I think is very important, how often I drive overall. So 27% of the owners said that overall my driving has decreased. We have 11% over there who said it has increased, and that's most likely for all sorts of other reasons, not the car sharing. And that they're also paying more attention to how and when they drive their car, and that's because they might want to rent it out to people. Okay, some other sort of changes in behavior. So we see that they're probably driving less. A lot of them say they are. What are they doing instead? And we see here, for example, 31% say they're walking more for transportation, 32% say they're biking more for transportation, 28% say that they're using public transit more. So there does seem to be some shift in their travel behavior. Now, one thing though, as the research went on, again, we went into this study, it's something that has not been researched before, peer-to-peer car sharing, brand new service, a little hard to anticipate all of the behavior. What we definitely found is that there are a lot of car owners who participated in the service and in our research who actually, over the time period, their car never actually got rented out, for whatever reason it might be. Some car owners didn't maybe make it available at the right hours and at the right price, at the right location. There's real range in how often the cars got rented. And so what this is showing, we divided all of our car owners into 3 groups based on how often their cars got rented out. The 0 group, the low group, and the high group. And what this is showing is basically it's the people who were able to rent their car out frequently are making the most changes in their behavior. And that makes perfect sense. The question that we'll be digging into is trying to figure out, are they renting their car out more because they're making it more available because they're changing their behavior? So what is the cause and effect? But it definitely is a reinforcing behavior. And I think it's important when we think about these programs and how effective they're going to be, the cars need to be in places where people are going to rent them for us to see this behavior change. So what about on the renter side? Okay, so we actually saw something similar here. So originally we enrolled 448 renters, or I should say potential renters, into our study. They completed an initial survey. Of those, 209, almost half of them did not complete a rental within the time period of our study, which for a lot of these folks was at least a year. So there's a lot of people who like, oh, okay, maybe I'm interested, complete a survey, and then for whatever reason, they never went forward. What I'm going to focus on in the results I'm showing you are only renters who actually did rent at least once, okay? And those are 239 people rented at least once. But again, it varies. So in terms of rentals per year, you can see a lot of people maybe less than one rental per year. And again, there was, maybe half or so are renting on a more frequent basis, but a real variation. So what are they doing when they're renting these cars? And this was quite interesting, and I think perhaps is reaching a different market than some of the other car sharing services. So what we did is every so often throughout the course of the study, we would send people a survey, and it would show the trips that they took when they rented a car. It was on a screen, and we would say, where did you go? What was the purpose of this trip? And if you hadn't used the Get Around service, how would you have made the trip? So we had almost 900 of those rental trips data. And you can see that almost a quarter of those trips were for out-of-town recreation. So people using these to go skiing up at Mount Hood or camping or whatever type of recreation it might be out of town. In contrast, though, the next most common was work-related trips. So 21% of the trips were work-related. And then you go on and you see things like shopping and errands, transporting things. So a lot of people are finding vans or pickup trucks, things like that, that they don't have in their own household when they want to transport something, usually. And you can see the whole range of trips. Now we had, just as a note, I'll say we had a category called appointments, and after the first round or two of this, we started noticing people writing in medical appointment, and so we quickly changed because we wanted to capture that, because that's a really different type of a trip. So we are seeing people using this for medical appointments. Not a huge market, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind. Okay, so those are the rental trip purposes. So if they didn't have this service, what would they do? Again, this is a little bit of a surprise for us. A third of them said, I would not have made this trip. Okay, so this is new travel that they are doing that otherwise would not occur. About 20% would have used public transit. An almost equal share would have used another car share company or rental car company or borrowed or some of these other options. But for the most part, they either wouldn't have made the trip or they would have used some other mode, whether it be transit or another car rental, car share. But it really varies, okay? And this is where the nuances of this, I think, are important. There isn't just one type of person using this service, either from the owner or the renter side. So those recreation out-of-town trips, which again were 24% or so of all trips, over half of those, the person would not have made the trip. So that new travel that's being generated, for the most part, seems to be things like recreation or down here visiting friends. So that's the type of travel that it seems to be spurring. For the more utility, work-related trips, shopping, errands, things like that, they would have used transit or perhaps borrowed a car, or car share would be the option. So different markets, different uses for these vehicles. Influence on car ownership, because that's one of the, on the renter side, that's where we hope to be seeing some behavior change. Again, about 65% of these households did not have any car already, and 71% had used some other car sharing service. So these are people who are already sort of in the car sharing alternative or non-auto mode users. And so service is clearly reinforcing that ability. So they are strongly agreeing that car sharing is allowing me to live comfortably without a car, or it's cheaper than owning a car. They don't necessarily want to own another car. What also was interesting, 21% strongly agreed that the availability of car sharing options would influence where they choose to live in the future. Okay, so this is tied to housing and land use decisions as well. So, some conclusions from what we have seen so far. First of all, who's participating in this? The demographics generally are pretty similar to the population of the city of Portland, with the big exception of being younger and more educated on both the owner side and the renter side. What about the impact on the owner's travel, which is, I think, particularly interesting? There's definitely some stated reductions in driving, particularly if the car is being rented out a lot. What about on the renter's travel? So most of the renters, at least in our study, are already in low or no vehicle households. This is providing another resource, another service that allows them to maintain that lifestyle and probably enhance it. We did see some increase in travel for certain purposes and perhaps some shifts from transit, but that is providing benefits. So there's a reason people are going out and recreating or visiting their family and friends, and this service is allowing them to do it when they otherwise could not have. The question that I said in the beginning we wanted to answer was, is it providing mobility options for lower income households? The jury is really out on that. It's really unclear. In the beginning, when we started doing our analysis, we did find that these vehicles were available in neighborhoods that other car sharing vehicles were not available in, and that perhaps it was expanding the market. That was at the beginning of the service. Getaround has changed their practice and their marketing, and a lot of those cars that were in those neighborhoods are no longer part of the service. And so I think we're going to have to wait and see how the service expands and continues in sort of the longer term to see if it will still meet the needs of those communities. One of our preliminary findings is that land use and geography of the market is really important. That it's really important to have, I would say, mixed income communities. So you have people who perhaps are higher income, who have an extra car that they don't drive, or they can afford other options that can be rented out. When you have communities that are primarily low income people who own cars use them a lot. They rely on them for their multiple jobs and all of their other needs. So I think mixed income communities are key to this type of service working. Couple caveats I'm going to end on. So our full analysis of sort of the net effects are going to include that GPS data. We're going to explore some of those other issues like the geography of this. And then also these are, again, all early adopters. I think it's going to be interesting to see as time goes on, does it change? Do we start getting older participants, more diverse participants, et cetera? So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker.